The horrible news coming out of Libya is on everyone's minds. We're joined now by Senator Jim Inhofe so we can learn his thoughts about what's going on in the Middle East. Senator Inhofe, tell us what you think is going on over there.
You know, this is something that happened. Let's don't forget. And so we're so quick to forget things like the first trip that this president took 4 years ago when he became president. Do you remember where that was to? That was to Egypt. And he spent his time apologizing to them for our conduct in the past. I've had several occasions of being with Netanyahu, and you know they shake their heads, wondering why in the world we have a president for the first time who's trashing Israel. Now we're faced with a couple of tragic things that's happened in Cairo as well as in Benghazi.
You knew Ambassador Stevens?
It happens that I knew Christopher Stevens. Actually, we call him Chris Stevens. He was in my office just a matter of a few weeks ago for his confirmation. Now, let's keep in mind, he was nominated by President Obama, but he was not one of his political guys. This guy had experience. He had been in Tripoli, Jerusalem, Damascus, Cairo, Riyadh, and a lot of other places, so he is well qualified. But what happened to him reminds me so much of what happened not too long ago, and we all remember what happened in Mogadishu when the naked bodies of our Marines were dragged through the streets. Well, that's exactly what happened to Chris Stevens. His partially naked body was dragged through the streets, and this direct affront to the United States of America. Then, of course, at the same time, almost concurrently, we had the problem in Cairo. And what was the president's response in Cairo? He said, and I'm going to read this because I couldn't make this up. You have to read it to believe it.
What did it say?
This was in response to what happened in the U.S. Embassy in Cairo by our State Department. This is Obama. Quote, the Embassy of the United States in Cairo condemns the continuing efforts by misguided individuals to hurt the religious feelings of Muslims, unquote. Now, here we are again apologizing. I don't know when this is going to stop, but these two events were I believe, a direct result of our new attitude that started 4 years ago in the Middle East.
Tell us a little bit about your important book.
One thing that was really missing from the Democrats' convention was any talk of global warming, of cap and trade, except in his speech, Obama couldn't just let it go without some kind of notice, and that's when he talked about the hoax. Well, the hoax, that's my book. You know, the hoax came in what he talked about was really a direct relationship with the book that I wrote. And then, of all things to happen, Clint Eastwood at the Republican convention coming out, and this is a quote, he said, President Obama is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. Hey, Mike, that actually, that was the subtitle of my book. So at least now we're getting attention. And I'll tell you why this is important now. I know that the other things are happening, distracting us from this. But you can be sure that this president has made every effort, if he is getting reelected, to try to impose upon the American people the largest tax increase in history. You might remember, Michael, we've talked about this before. This $300 to $400 billion tax increase would be an annual tax increase on the American people. And you might remember, I know that there are a lot of listeners out there listening to us who think that I've been wrong on this whole hoax. Let's keep in mind, we specifically asked the director of the Environmental Protection Agency, Lisa Jackson, and live on TV, I said, in the event that you are able to pass some of this legislation on the cap and trade tax, will this reduce CO2? Will it reduce anthropogenic gases? Her answer was no, it wouldn't, because the problem is not here. The problem is in Egypt, and the problem's in Mexico and China and in India. And so you could carry it to its logical conclusion, Michael, that if we were to pass that type of thing here, not only would we get the largest tax increase in the history of America, you would actually end up with an increase in CO2 emissions because we'd be losing our manufacturing base to places that have no restrictions. So that's why we've got to keep that issue alive. Obviously, it's in my book, The Greatest Hoax. And if anyone would listen to just pull up thegreatesthoax.com, the publisher has that website, and in that you'll see some really fun interviews that I've had with some of the most liberal groups, including Rachel Maddow and several others. So I think we need to keep in mind that should this guy get reelected, he's going to have, the crown jewel of all regulations is cap and trade.
How has it been received?
Well, it's been received well because the fact people didn't know. For example, this whole thing started in 1992. That was the Earth Summit down in Rio de Janeiro. And remember, Al Gore went down there, and they were going to come back and have the Kyoto Treaty. Obviously, we did not vote to ratify. It wasn't even submitted for ratification. But that's when everybody started introducing bills, recognizing that this is or feeling that this is something that was going to become very popular. I can remember, and Michael, you can remember too, back in the old days when the financial backbone of the Democratic Party in terms of supporting races, congressional races, was the labor unions. Then it was all kinds of other things. In the last 10 years, it's been the far left environmental activists. It's been MoveOn.org and George Soros and Michael Moore, Al Gore, the Hollywood elite. And they're the ones, they don't put in thousands of dollars. They put in millions of dollars in campaigns. Well, you got to keep in mind, they haven't given up. They're still going to want to try to pass the largest tax increase in the history of America. That would be a cap and trade tax increase. And by the way, when you talk about large numbers like $300 to $400 billion, our heads start swirling. We're not real sure what that means to us personally. So what I do, Michael, in my state of Oklahoma, every year I get a list of the number of families who file a federal tax return, and I do the math. What that would mean, a $300 to $400 billion tax increase would be over $3,000 a family. And even those people who believe that man-made gases, CO2, are causing catastrophic global warming. Even if that's true, then we know that this wouldn't have the effect of reducing emissions. So that's $3,000 for every tax-paying family in my state of Oklahoma. It's a big deal. We got to keep talking about it.
Well, what are the chances of that happening?
Well, what's happening right now, and you got to keep in mind we got an election less than 2 months away. But how many people know? Even Michael, as well informed as you are you aware that this administration, we can identify in the last 4 years, $68.4 billion going toward global warming issues and the green agenda. So he's doing it right now, and he's doing it with through the bureaucracy. And so it's happening today, but if by some reason he should be reelected, I can assure you that would be his number one goal. And there are a lot of things that he hasn't done that he has whispered and said, look, don't worry, we'll take care of that, but I've got to get reelected first. Remember his conversation with Medvedev when the mic was on, and he didn't know it. And he talked about, just help me get reelected, then we'll go even further. That's my concern.
Where can we read more?
Here's what I'd like to do. You can get the book, The Greatest Hoax, and you can get it off any of the sources you normally get, but at least go to the website that the publisher has, thegreatesthoax.com, and in this you'll find out some of the information, how far we go. Again, the most interesting and the longest chapter is the United Nations, how this whole thing started in 1992 and what the real motive was. And this was before ClimateGate, before their science was totally rejected. But they're not going to give up, and they're going to be back. So go to the website, look at it, and you'll be well informed.
Senator Jim Inhofe, thanks again for being with us on the Savage Nation during this important time.
Okay, thanks so much.
I'll be right back. It's the Savage Nation.
Savage.